It takes up to 4 months to shape, bend, and grind just one of these massive barrels. They're the cannons for artillery weapons like howitzers. And Watervliet Arsenal is the only place in America that makes them. Demand for these has surged since the US started shipping them to Ukraine in 2022. But the factory is over 200 years old, and some of the equipment has struggled to keep up.
We're working right now with a piece of equipment that really is probably 20 years past its obsolete state.
So in 2023, the US announced a $1.7 billion investment to modernize Watervliet Arsenal and boost the Army's supply of cannon tubes.
If the product that leaves here isn't incorrect, there's a soldier's life that stands on the line on the other end.
So how do cannon barrels get from the factory to the battlefield? And why is there only one place in America making them? Watervliet has been making cannon barrels in upstate New York since 1889. By World War II, the US had over 100 government-owned facilities making weapons, and this arsenal was producing as many as 2,500 cannons a month.
2,400 men work top speed in this plant.
President Roosevelt also ordered other factories to pivot from making products like cars and toys to artillery shells, bomb shells, and even planes.
So they had to be simple, they had to be modular, they had to be something that a person not trained in weapons manufacturing would be able to do. So we had to redesign in a lot of cases rockets and artillery shells and artillery pieces themselves and tanks so that they could be built at a car factory or a dishwasher factory.
Ford Motor Company got so good at building planes, its Michigan plant rolled one out every 63 minutes. By the end of the war, the US had made more than 300,000 military aircraft, compared to just 139 civilian cars.
After the Depression, these manufacturers didn't have a competing business because there was no other business.
In the decades after World War II, demand for many of these weapons fell, so the Pentagon closed hundreds of military facilities.
They didn't see another conflict like World War II coming on the horizon.
When the Cold War began, the Pentagon needed new, high-tech weapons, and fast. So it turned to private companies to design and produce them.
That ecosystem of private innovation combined with the government acquisition process was pretty effective through the Cold War.
But defense budgets fell after the Vietnam War, and many smaller companies struggled to stay in business.
They weren't big enough to be able to survive on their own with the lower demand signal from the government. They had consolidated with other defense companies. And so that's how we ended up with today 5 big defense prime companies. New companies like Palantir have argued that this consolidation was a mistake because what it did was tamp down innovation.
But the Army still operates 23 weapons facilities today, including America's only remaining cannon barrel producer, Watervliet.
It's so specialized and requires such expensive manufacturing equipment. So those had to be built in arsenals. You couldn't get a commercial company or even a private company to make that kind of investment.
When we visited the factory in 2024, it was using a mix of new and old machines. Cannon barrels start as steel cylinders, shipped to Watervliet from foundries across the US. They're heated in a massive 2,000-degree furnace to soften them up before they're molded into barrels. This machine, called a rotary forge, is like a blacksmith's hammer, but the size of a railroad car. It spins the steel rod while pounding it into the shape of a cannon. But the forge is long past its prime, so the arsenal is planning to replace it by 2026.
It's a 50-year-old piece of equipment with tens of thousands of cannon tubes being produced since its inception in 1974.
After 14 minutes, the barrel is ready. A crane lifts the tube and plops it onto a rack to cool off. They heat and cool the tubes a few more times to add strength and prevent cracks on the battlefield. That's important because each blast puts a huge amount of stress on the tube. They're attached to artillery weapons like howitzers, which fire 100-pound shells high into the air and onto targets up to 15 miles away. The shells explode on impact and send deadly shrapnel in all directions. But heating and forging the barrel tends to bend it.
Like a piece of wood if you're cutting it with a saw.
Even the slightest imperfection could damage the cannon or cause it to miss its target when it fires. New hydraulic presses from 2021 bend the tubes with thousands of tons of pressure until they're perfectly straight.
Very challenging operation. This isn't something that you can read a book and jump right in. It takes a technician about 4 to 5 years working with a master presser.
New lathe machines, which spin the tube while trimming off extra metal, were installed in 2021.
Every cut that we take, that's all pre-calculated. It's based off of years of experience, over 100 years of cannon making. If you were here 5 years ago, you'd have seen old, gray, yellow machines that were from 1979.
But humans still add a final touch, grinding down the tube's sharp edges so they're easier to handle. Scott Huber oversees this phase.
We call it the Rolls-Royce treatment. It really puts that final finishing touch, that craftsmanship to that barrel before it leaves Watervliet.
Workers use scopes and 3D scanners to inspect the barrel for imperfections.
If it's got a flaw in it that causes, for example, a crack that propagates after a few rounds get shot out, you could end up with a situation where the gun barrel has a catastrophic failure and it injures the people that are operating it. And that's happened, obviously, in the past.
Then they drag the tube into a booth and spray it with paint.
It's specialized to withstand all different types of conditions and potential for chemical attacks or biological attacks. Obviously, we mitigate that with personal protective equipment and the ventilation, filtration.
Will says that within a few years, this step will be automated. Another critical safety feature, the hatch to the chamber where soldiers add the 100-pound shells, called the breech block. It's like a heavy metal door that seals the back of the gun before each fire, protecting soldiers from blasts stronger than 50 hand grenades going off at once. Robert Kavanaugh's team makes the breech block with this new device that was installed in 2021. It has a robotic arm that can make precise cuts and do the job of multiple old machines.
I'm not bouncing around to 5 different machines in a day to do 5 separate operations that can be done in this one machine in half the time. Fewer setups mean fewer errors. Fewer errors lead to increased quantity and increased quality.
Then, the moment of truth, a test to see if everything is working.
What we're looking for is a smooth operation to make sure nothing's hanging up, nothing's jamming. We're going to go ahead and manually open the breech, which drops the block and allows access to the bore of the tube itself. This is when the crew would insert an actual round. This is a simulated round, obviously, and then close the block, which would be ready for firing at this point.
This newer breech block opens and shuts automatically, making it easier to load. It was designed with researchers from the Army's on-site lab. These new machines have helped the Pentagon increase howitzer barrel production from 11 a month to 18 as of early 2025. Once the barrels are finished, they're shipped to plants owned by the company BAE Systems, one of the world's largest weapons manufacturers, where they're assembled. Some finished howitzers stay in the U.S. for training, like at the Army's Field Artillery School in Oklahoma. Handling a howitzer isn't easy, so one of the school's final tests involves loading and firing one.
Floor clear, 1 round fired! Ready, drop! Okay!
We all wear the ear protection, so we really can't hear. So you gotta be very, very vocal, very loud.
Set! Deflection, 3, 4, 6, 3, ready! Stand by! Hooked up! Mark! Expecting!
The rounds can range from 40 to 50 pounds all the way up to about 110 pounds. And they shoot about 88 rounds here in a span of 2 days, so moving that much weight is the biggest challenge that they face.
Verified.
You got to be able to do that over and over and over again.
Fire!
But some howitzers go straight into battle. For the first time in 2 decades, the U.S. is sending more weapons to Europe than to the Middle East. Since 2022, it's shipped more weapons to Ukraine than any other country, from its own stockpile and through private contracts.
the U.S. or U.S. allies used weapons at a much greater pace than the U.S. had anticipated.
Artillery is still considered the king of battle because it's mass-produced firepower.
It's also a cheaper investment for long battles, averaging a few $1,000s per fire.
Than, say, a $1 or $2 million guided missile.
But artillery has its drawbacks. Most howitzers have to be towed by bigger vehicles, and setting them up takes time. That leaves soldiers exposed.
Очень надо много техники, потому что то есть люди без техники много ничего не сделают.
Traditionally, the strategy has been to fire from a position and then move to another quickly and then set up and be ready for a new fire position. Now, drones complicate that because another way that the artillery system and its crew can be spotted is if they're on the move.
Self-propelled howitzers, like the M109 Paladin, are more mobile and travel on armored vehicles, giving crews more protection. They're more expensive and harder to maintain. But all howitzer barrels eventually break down, usually after about 1,500 shots. Facing shortages, Ukrainian troops have been piecing together parts from multiple wrecked howitzers just to get one working. Earlier in the war, the US had another strategy to get more of them to Ukraine, refurbishing older ones. Some of them were stored at Sierra Army Depot in Herlong, California, which maintains about $12 billion worth of the Army's weapons and gear. This 36,000-acre compound is more than twice the size of Manhattan. Gear arrives here weekly by rail and truck. Don Olson has been the commander's deputy at the depot since 2007.
So we're the holder of the old stuff, the stuff that nobody knows what to do with yet. We reissue them to units across the world. That saves the Army from having to buy it new, and that's about $200 million every year. These are old Vietnam-era armor personnel carriers, and we're retrofitting them to make them ambulances for the folks in Ukraine. Probably the highest dollar value items are the tanks, the howitzers, so that's probably $10.5 to $11 billion. We have the M1 main battle tank for the Army. If you see any without barrels, those are probably barrels that have been reclaimed, pulled off, and sent to Ukraine in support of their efforts.
Don was Watervliet Arsenal's commander from 2002 to 2005, before he moved to Sierra Depot.
All of the tubes that were manufactured at Watervliet Arsenal when I was the commander there had my initials permanently stamped in them. They've probably been to Iraq, they've probably been to Afghanistan with U.S. units. They've then come back to the United States. They've come here, and now they're going to be refurbished and they're going to go back over to Ukraine or go to Taiwan in support of their warfighting efforts.
Stamping the initials of the factory's commander is still a tradition today.
That tradition goes back all the way since the first time we produced cannon tubes early in World War I, 1917.
Automation is definitely replacing some of these operations, but there's still always going to be that little human touch at the end.